About 55% of Indian exports to the U.S. are expected to take a hit from tariffs imposed by the Trump administration.
For us, the interests of our farmers are our top priority. America has never been our friend. All of this is just theater.
As expected, the White House has announced an increase on duties to Canadian softwood lumber.
Since August 1st, 2025, his administration has been moving forward with new aggressive trade measures affecting both luxury products and essential goods. Two sensitive points stand out. First, a 50% duty on Indian products, notably the majority of diamonds and jewelry entering the United States. Second, a series of significant taxes on Canadian exports, such as wood, now taxed at over 35%. The White House presents these measures as a pressure tool, a strategy to secure better deals for America. But in reality, the cost falls on you, American households, from engagement rings to the construction of new homes.
Now, 90% of diamonds are manufactured in India, so cut and polished in India. That's not going to change in the near term. So a lot of this price increase will get passed on to the U.S. consumer.
India is at the heart of the global diamond trade. According to the Gem and Jewelry Export Council, nearly 90% of the world's diamonds are cut and polished in that country. At the beginning of August, the United States raised duties on certain Indian products from 25% to 50% due to India's continued purchases of Russian oil. In New York's Diamond District, the effect was immediate. Jewelers cannot absorb these costs. Previously, the industry could share the impact between suppliers and customers. With 50% duties, the calculation becomes impossible. Retail prices will rise rapidly just before the holiday season, a period when jewelry sales normally peak. And that's not all. The price of gold, already at record levels, has doubled in recent years. These combined factors make engagement rings and other quality jewelry unaffordable for many Americans. Some even consider traveling abroad to buy where taxes do not apply. But let's be realistic. For the majority, this remains out of reach. The result, additional pressure on an already transitioning industry as synthetic diamonds gain ground. The same type of pressure is felt in American trade with Canada. Wood is the most striking example. This month, Washington doubled certain duties, bringing the total rate on Canadian wood to 35.2%. These taxes have added about $6,000 to the cost of building a single-family home in the United States. For the American middle class, building a home is becoming almost impossible. This is not an abstract number. It affects your daily life. The Ontario Forest Industries Association cites research showing this $6,000 increase. Canadian officials point out that the burden falls mainly on middle-class families and Americans rebuilding after disasters like fires or hurricanes. Ottawa is not standing idle. A few days before the American announcement, Prime Minister Mark Carney presented a support plan of 1.2 billion Canadian dollars, including $700 million in loan guarantees to maintain sawmills and $500 million to diversify markets and develop new products. From diamonds to wood, the Trump tariffs are transforming the American market. Luxury products are becoming less accessible, and the price of essential goods is rising. Yale's budget laboratory estimates that the 2025 tariff package could add several $1,000s to the annual expenses of an average household, tightening the budget even further. While Trump brandishes his tariffs as a negotiating tool, Canada, under Mark Carney, is taking a more measured path, supporting its industries, gauging its responses, and diversifying its markets toward Europe and Asia. The real question remains: will these tariff policies really benefit the United States, or will they simply make Americans pay more while Canada holds firm? President Trump has imposed global tariffs on more than 90 countries, ranging from 10 to 50%, with particularly heavy taxes on certain major U.S. trading partners. Let's focus on what we can control, not on what Donald Trump dictates, said Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. President Trump has imposed global tariffs on more than 90 countries, ranging from 10 to 50%, with particularly heavy taxes on certain major U.S. trading partners. Let's focus on what we can control, not on what Donald Trump dictates, said Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. On August 7, 2025, U.S. Customs began collecting a new series of tariffs on imports from more than 60 countries. Rates range from 10 to 50%. Brazil faces a 50% duty, Switzerland 39%, Laos and Myanmar 40%. The European Union, Japan, and South Korea pay 15%, and the United Kingdom 10% following its agreement. Trump also mentioned a potential 100% duty on foreign computer chips with exemptions for companies producing in the United States. Apple has committed to investing $100 billion, but the chip tariff is not yet official. In concrete terms for you, Americans, this means that tariffs are now at their highest level in a century. The president posted on social media, billions of dollars in tariffs are flowing into the United States today. According to a Yale Research Center, these new taxes could cost an additional $2,400 per year for each average family. In July, the U.S. government had already collected more than $150 billion from existing tariffs. Economists point out that these costs are borne by American importers and are often passed on to you, the consumers. In June, the Consumer Price Index showed rising costs for household appliances, clothing, and furniture. Beyond North America, the same tariff logic hits other exporters. India sees its taxes rise from 25% to 50% due to Russian oil purchases, while South Africa warns of job losses, being forced to seek less profitable markets in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. For Ottawa, the message is clear. Exports must be quickly redirected. Canadian diversification is already visible, with Ontario grain heading to Europe. Speed and discipline are essential. Here in Canada, officials are already discussing the impact of tariffs after Trump's announcement of a 35% increase. Canada has been facing these new pressures since August 1st, when the Trump administration raised tariffs on non-USMCA products to 35%. More than 85% of bilateral trade remains exempt from taxes, but certain targeted sectors are already feeling the pressure. Wood faces already high U.S. duties. Steel, aluminum, and certain manufactured goods now face additional obstacles. Some exporters are reacting quickly. Ontario is both a major producer and a major buyer of grains. The province imports large volumes of certain U.S. grains, making it the top customer of farmers from 35 to 40 U.S. states. At the same time, it exports Canadian grains abroad. With the new 35% tariff on non-USMCA products, some shipments have been diverted from the U.S. market to Europe. This redirection can help Canada diversify, but it may also deprive U.S. farmers of one of their most loyal customers if cross-border purchases slow down. The Prime Minister has remained discreet one day after indicating that he might consider lifting some counter-tariffs on U.S. products if it benefited Canadian industries. Mark Carney met with his cabinet and provincial premiers in Ottawa to harmonize the national strategy. His message? Engage in open dialogue with Washington, avoid bad deals, and protect local industries from immediate harm. He mentioned the possibility of removing certain counter-tariffs if it benefited key sectors. Provincial leaders, however, are not unanimous. Doug Ford in Ontario supports the tariff-for-tariff measure and warns against blind trust in Trump. Scott Moe from Saskatchewan prefers reducing or abandoning some counter-tariffs to ease domestic costs. Trade experts recommend keeping retaliations as leverage without going too far. Canada is also relying on large industrial projects. Volkswagen's $7 billion battery plant in St. Thomas is moving forward despite uncertainties. In other areas, delays and cost overruns are being felt. The chief of firefighters in Amherstburg cites delays and higher costs for a $3.1 million U.S. fire truck built over 3 years due to tariffs and a component shortage. The coming weeks will show whether Trump formalizes the 100% duty on chips and how exemptions will be defined. Canada will be able to adjust its counter-tariffs to protect vulnerable sectors while maintaining a negotiating lever. In the United States, the first price increases could spread, putting more pressure on import-dependent industries. Trump's tariffs are both an economic weapon and a political signal. For Carney, the challenge is to protect the Canadian economy while keeping options open. Decisions made now will determine whether this confrontation escalates or evolves into a new fragile balance. Brazil could retaliate with its own taxes if the United States applies what it had planned for August 1st. President Donald Trump's trade doctrine for a second term is entering an unstable phase. In recent weeks, his administration has sent official notices to several trading partners, 35% for Canada, 30% for Mexico, 50% for Brazil. These measures are not only economic, they are shows of strength, and the world is reacting. Rather than strengthening American influence, this tariff offensive hardens resistance. Countries once dependent on American trade are now coordinating their responses, or even turning away completely. We all agree that it is essential to respect the modernized NAFTA, USMCA agreements, and we shared our impressions of the letter received from Trump. One of the clearest signs of the backlash from his pressure appeared this week. Canada and Mexico publicly committed to strengthening bilateral trade. They confirmed having received the American letters regarding tariffs, 35% for Canada, 30% for Mexico, set to take effect on August 1st if negotiations fail. In response, Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to strengthen their economic cooperation.
Carney is expected to travel to Mexico in the coming weeks to formalize joint strategies. For these two neighbors, long linked to the United States through the USMCA, this pivot represents a major realignment. Rather than causing fractures, Trump's tariff threats bring American allies closer without the United States. Think about it. In 50 years, relations between Brazil and Washington have never been so tense. Tensions to the south are even more pronounced.
Brazil has faced the highest tariff, 50% on all its exports to the United States, compared to 10% announced in April. Trump justifies this measure as a response to what he calls the political persecution of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, accused of his role in the January 2023 attempted coup. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva rejects this decision, calling it political interference.
His administration immediately activated a rapid response mechanism authorizing counter-tariffs on American products. According to the Brazilian Ministry of Development, only 12% of Brazilian exports go to the United States, which allows trade to be redirected with minimal disruption.
Affected sectors include oil, orange juice, coffee, and steel. The economic exposure remains manageable, but the diplomatic damage is real. Lula has publicly shown his willingness to strengthen ties with BRICS countries and Asian partners, a trend accelerated by Trump's measures. You know, this is a secondary and very personal game. Trump dislikes someone, and it has heavy consequences on American relations with Latin America. The repercussions go beyond Brazil. In Colombia, relations rapidly deteriorated after allegations linking U.S. officials to a political plot.
Trump recalled the ambassador and threatened to withdraw anti-drug cooperation certification, which could cut vital aid. But President Gustavo Petro is not intimidated and is exploring deeper ties with BRICS institutions, including for development and financing outside the American orbit. Across Latin America, a discrete realignment is underway. Countries are seeking to diversify trade, limit their dependence on Washington, and reduce political risks. Trump's aggressive posture aims to assert his dominance, but the region's reaction shows the opposite effect. Is it a political failure for the Prime Minister? If Canada maintains certain tariffs, is it simply the harsh reality of dealing with Donald Trump? What was supposed to strengthen American influence seems to be collapsing. Instead of imposing its conditions, the tariff campaign brings partners closer and moves them away from Washington. Canada is no longer negotiating alone.
Mexico no longer abstains from aligning. Brazil, once neutral, openly defies American influence. In Europe, even close allies are preparing long-term trade diversification. For the Trump administration, the immediate political effect may appeal to part of its electorate, but the long-term cost results in fractures, declining diplomatic capital, and global supply chains now bypassing the United States. The true impact of these tariffs may not be measured by what they tax, but by what they destroy. With all these tariffs and trade tensions, who do you think pays the highest price? American consumers, Canadian industries, or Brazilian farmers? Let us know what you think in the comments.